Our research is diverse. It's like our environments. It's often interdisciplinary, and it's often undertaken with partners from around Europe, North America, and around the globe. And collaboration is right at the heart of what we do.
Stuart, thank you very much. You've given a fantastic summary there of the work that the university is doing, and just showing that the Highlands and Islands of Scotland is not somewhere that is in aspect and is not Brigadoon, but it's actually leading the way in environmental and other research across the planet. Welcome to Scotland and the Centre for Health Science here at the University of the Highlands and Islands. Our university is a partnership of 13 colleges and research institutes and was born out of a project that started 30 years ago. In that time, although we're still growing, we have developed into a fully fledged tertiary institution. What that means is that we cover both college and university education under one single university. In this session, we'll hear about our environmental, health and engineering capabilities. They were developed from a standing start 15 years ago and now have internationally recognised programmes. Firstly, we'll hear from Professor Ian Megson, who works here at the Centre for Health Science in Inverness. He'll talk about how he uses our campus as a living laboratory. After that, I'll have a word from my colleague Alison Wilson, our Head of Development, who'll tell us a little bit more about the university and also how you can connect with us. Then we'll head north to hear from Professor Stuart Gibb, who runs our Environmental Research Institute, where he'll talk a little bit more about how he does environmental research and education both at land and in the marine environment. Thanks, Ian, for taking the time to speak to us today about the tremendous progress that's been made really in health and life sciences in the Highlands and Islands over the last 15 years. And we as a university have really built up a presence in this. Why has that come about, and why specifically the Highlands and Islands?
It really goes back to 2006, when a number of individuals in the university and within industry around Inverness got together and decided that in order to capitalise on the success of a local company, started off as Inverness Medical and was then taken over by Johnson & Johnson and became LifeScan Scotland, and employed at that time around about 1,500 people in the health sector. In order to capitalise on that, we needed research to support that industry and to grow it. You'll be aware, of course, of magnet cities and these kind of things, where industry is sucked in to a particular region because of a prowess in a particular area. And all of those magnet cities have a university at their base. I joined the university at that point with a remit really to bring health research up to the world leading standards that the UK as a whole has, and Scotland in particular has. The growth has just been astonishing, really. We have now grown to around about 75 to 80 researchers in health alone. Really, this has, as I say, been driven by our relationship with Highlands and Islands Enterprise. They've certainly invested, as did LifeScan at the start. There are specific aspects to the region which are unique to the UK in terms of healthcare delivery. The rurality and the geography, which is tricky to deliver healthcare at a reasonable cost. But of course, what we have to remember is that whilst it's unique to the UK, it is a global issue. It's no different, indeed, from Texas or Washington State, where there are big populations but covering a huge area, and delivering healthcare effectively over areas like that is difficult. The other aspect that is unique to the Highlands and Islands is our population, which, for reasons yet to be discovered, is relatively prone to some quite common diseases. So diabetes type 1 is prevalent in the north of Scotland, to the extent that Orkney are second only to Sardinia for incidence of type 1 diabetes. Equally, we have an ageing population, the reason being that individuals leave the region to earn their living elsewhere and then come back and retire here. So that ageing population means that we attract those diseases associated with age, such as cancer, heart disease, diabetes again. And you add those two things together, the industrial potential plus the population that has a need, and we think we've got a unique opportunity to deliver world-class research in that area.
I mean, I think you've described it beautifully as like a real living laboratory in these areas. Over that time, you've said it's grown very quickly in terms of what would normally be expected in the industry. What successes would you say that we've had as a university in these 15 years?
Research excellence is the best way to measure our success here. In the last research excellence exercise that is carried out nationwide, our university, in terms of health research, was found to have 17% world-leading research. Now that, from a standing start in 2006, is just mind-blowing. More importantly nowadays, it's about impact. It's how has that translated into medical interventions or indeed healthcare interventions as a whole? Just a couple of examples of some of the innovations that have come out of our university. We have an antibody therapy for liver cancer, which is currently in clinical trials in China. These things are always risky at this stage, but to give you an indication of where those clinical trials are leading at the moment, they have indicated a doubling of life expectancy since diagnosis in the patients that it's been tried in. We have the opportunity to license that worldwide, and we're currently looking for other partners in the likes of the States and Europe to take the patents in those territories.
Where would you see further investment in the area taking things forward, and what other problems would you like to solve that we can do uniquely in the university given the work you've done so far?
The question is how best to use investment, and really for us there are three options. There's the likes of real estate, buildings, there is equipment, and there is people. I would like to see investment in people. That might mean sponsoring chairs. It might mean investing in specific projects to drive them towards a commercial outcome or a healthcare benefit outcome. We also need world-leading equipment to make sure that we maintain our status in terms of breakthroughs that will make a difference. Investment will allow us certainly to become wholly sustainable, and on top of that, it will allow us to expand into new and exciting areas. And an example of that is that we have City Deal funding at the moment, which has allowed us to bring in a world-leading researcher in medical nanotechnology, which is an area of growth. And we are right at the tip of that spearhead. It's a hugely exciting program of work that's developing there. We're going to need investment to back that up and to make sure it's sustainable.
How do we ensure that we stay connected to the global science community? And also, what is it that the university can do just to keep that edge and keep us going in this very, very, very important direction?
We're using our population as a rural test bed, if you like, to identify problems in a particularly difficult healthcare area to deliver outcomes against. Those outcomes are instantly translatable to worldwide audiences. Yes, we're embedded in this region and we utilize that to our benefit, but the key thing is to deliver world-class research. If it's world-class and world-leading, by definition, it will be taken up elsewhere. If we're going to keep where we've managed to get ourselves to, we're going to need that investment to take things from our regional scale and make them globally impactful.
Well, I'm sure everyone who's watching this will wish you well, as I do, and we'll look forward to hear about more in the future about what the university has developed in this area. Thanks very much, Ian.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, and hello, everyone. I'm Alison Wilson, Head of Development here at the University of the Highlands and Islands, and I'd like to thank you all for joining our ScotWeek 2021 session. We hope that it gives you a sense of the Highlands and Islands of today. The conversations with my academic colleagues will tell you something of the expertise we have developed in the region through homegrown initiatives and inward investment, and explore the unique qualities that the University of the Highlands and Islands has brought to the region in terms of environmental, health and engineering expertise. I hope as you listen you will get a sense of our common sense of purpose to have a transformational impact on the prospects of our region, its economy, its people and its communities. The university has strong connections with the United States through our US students, university partnerships, our American alumni, donors and supporters, and not least through the University of the Highlands and Islands of Scotland Foundation. As a 501c charity which aims to promote education, particularly amongst marginalised populations, the Foundation believes that providing access to higher education to the broadest range of people is vital, and it wants to support our university to make that happen. The Foundation seeks to raise funds in support of scholarships, buildings, academic leaders, teaching programmes and research. And the University of the Highlands and Islands is honoured to be building a community of US friends, supporters and donors. We invite our American friends to connect with us and help us. This is a unique opportunity to connect to your Scottish roots, as well as ignite a passion to learn more about a distinctive educational model, fascinating region and culture. We are a university that dares to be different, and we would love for you to join us on our journey. I'd now like you to hear from my colleague, Professor Stuart Gibb, who leads our Environmental Research Institute based in Thurso, the northernmost town on the British mainland.
Stuart, just as our first question, what in our region lends itself to environmental research, both on land and at sea?
In effect, our region is a complex and interconnected mosaic of habitats. These provide the rich and varied landscapes we associate with the region, some of which are unique and some of which are not just of national importance, but are also now regarded as being internationally significant. Marine Scotland estimate that we've around 18,000 kilometres of coastline in Scotland, but within this huge number is also great diversity. We can think about the shallow firthlands in the east of the Highlands and contrast these with the deep fjordic sea lochs on the west of the region, and recognise the huge diversity of soft and hard coast environments in between. And meanwhile, we're only starting to understand the full value of others. And an example of this is the Flow Country, which covers around 400,000 hectares of Caithness and Sutherland in the far north of Scotland. This is regarded as the largest area of blanket bog in Europe. Indeed, it may be the largest area of blanket bog in the world. But as our understanding of the role of peatlands in biodiversity, in carbon storage, climate change, and ecosystem services grows, so does the national and international recognition for these landscapes. And UHI is at the forefront of undertaking and coordinating research in this area. The mosaic of habitats that we've just referred to provides incredible space for biodiversity, both on land and at sea. And that's biodiversity that supports our lives and provides many of the things that sustain our lives: food, drink, raw materials. And some have started to describe this as our living bank balance. It's a living laboratory of international significance, if you like. And this power of place provides us with unrivaled scientific opportunities to undertake research that is internationally recognised and competitive. However, the whole socioeconomic fabric of our region, as you know, is highly reliant on the use and management of many of these natural systems. If we think about the importance of fisheries, aquaculture, forestry, renewable energy, and that's before we consider the wider ecosystem benefits, such as clean water, climate regulation, ways in which nature impacts people's health and well-being through recreational and educational benefits. Whilst this is a wonderful place to undertake environmental research, how we use this research to inform utilisation, conservation, management and policy is also critically important and an integral part of promoting the sustainability in not just this region, but also other regions throughout Europe and the rest of the world with similar challenges.
Can you give us some examples of where we're leading the planet in these areas? We talked about climate change, you've talked about the environment. Where is the University of the Highlands leading in this area?
To a large degree, our research mirrors our environment. Mountain areas are vital sources of water for agriculture, industrial and domestic use, and can also be important centres for biodiversity. And in UHI, we have a centre for mountain studies. And the team here are involved in a range of projects, often highly interdisciplinary, and applied at a variety of scales from across Scotland across the globe. And this includes looking at climate change in mountain areas and across Northern Europe. And the centre also hosts the UNESCO Chair in Sustainable Mountain Development. Meanwhile, in Oban, we have the world-renowned Scottish Association for Marine Sciences. The teams there are working towards achieving healthy and sustainable seas and oceans. And they do this not only through world-class marine research, but also through education and engagement with society. Particular focus at the moment for researchers at SAMS is in the Arctic Ocean. We know that that's a region currently undergoing unprecedented rates of change. In the marine system, we have warming, we have reduced ice cover, and that's impacting on whole ecosystem function, with changes already observed throughout Arctic food webs. And SAMS are at the forefront of UK research in this area. They're leading initiatives that exploit novel analytical tools, robotic vehicles to understand the consequences of climate change. Then in between the mountains and maritime research, we have a Rivers and Lochs Institute in Inverness, and they specialise in molecular genetics to aid conservation and management of all biodiversity in fresh waters, in our rivers and in our lochs. And a key tool for them is the use of eDNA in the conservation of species. And these species include the Atlantic salmon, Arctic char, and freshwater paramussels. But eDNA can also be used to map entire ecosystems, from observing the effects of freshwater biodiversity to monitoring seabed cages below fish farms to support aquaculture management. Then at our own institute, the Environmental Research Institute in Thurso, we're interested in topics including renewable energy and the environment, environmental contamination, ecological health, and carbon, water and climate. Just to give you an example of a couple of recent stories in the news about the work, one includes the use of drones, aerial drones, to identify potential sites for marine renewable energy development. Current methods for measuring tidal streams rely on using either survey vessels or installing seabed sensors. And these can be both time-consuming and pretty expensive. So we hope that our approach will help spot locations for underwater tidal turbines and reduce costs for renewable energy developers, perhaps also generating opportunities for developing countries. We also work with stakeholders, including the health service, water providers and regulators, on reducing pharmaceutical contamination of natural waters. And this work has recently been recognised at an awards ceremony by the British Medical Journal, and also just been shortlisted for another National Knowledge Exchange Award. Our research is diverse. It's like our environments. It's often interdisciplinary, and it's often undertaken with partners from around Europe, North America and around the globe. And collaboration is right at the heart of what we do.
Stuart, thank you very much. You've given a fantastic summary there of the work that the university is doing, and just showing that the Highlands and Islands of Scotland is not somewhere that is in aspect and is not Brigadoon, but it's actually leading the way in environmental and other research across the planet. Thank you, Stuart. It's always fascinating to hear the developments that are going on across our campus, even to this day. Finally, we'll hear from Professor Andrew Rae, who's developed an aerospace specialism here at the university. And his team, based in Perth, have now developed an internationally recognised programme of education and research. Andrew and his team are also developing new electric aircraft, working with Los Angeles-based company Ampaire. This is really important to us because, as well as providing energy-efficient transport between our islands, it also helps with our green agenda. After we hear from Andrew, I'll be handing back to our hosts at ScotWeek 2021. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed this brief insight into some of the work we do here at the University of the Highlands and Islands. But please get in touch. Drop us a note. Come and visit us here in the Scottish Highlands, or support us in any way you can. We know that the university has started to work with American companies, Boeing, Lockheed Martin and Ampaire, which you're part of. Why would the likes of Boeing and Lockheed Martin, why would they then decide, yes, that specifically the geography of the Highlands and Islands or the expertise in the university, why would that be attractive to them as opposed to maybe going and working with some established universities around the world which have got a longer pedigree?
It's partly geographical, so that those companies are working in our region and we are the only university based in that region, but we also have the skills and expertise that they need. We're on their doorstep and we can deliver what they want. But if we take Boeing to start with, their interest in the region is around the Royal Air Force and the base at Lossiemouth, which is home to the RAF's new maritime patrol capability, the P8 Poseidon, and also coming up the Wedgetail as well, which are both based on the 737. So they're supporting the Royal Air Force and UK Ministry of Defence to integrate that capability at Lossiemouth, and around that integration is a requirement to support that with skills and innovation and research, and that's where we come in on all three of those.
And also, we've got now the potential for 2 spaceports. Why Scotland for spaceports? What's the attraction?
Especially north of Scotland, one of the attractions on many fronts is the fact that it's not as populated as other parts of the UK or Europe, but it does have access to clearer airspace for launch capability without impinging too much on the local community and the landscape.
Alongside these developments with Boeing and Lockheed Martin, you're working with Ampaire, who I understand are based in Los Angeles, and that's really to look at electric aircraft, the hydrogen-powered aircraft and such like. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing with them?
It's a wonderful project, and it's based in Orkney, working with the local operator of most of the airports in the Highlands and Islands. It's funded partly through the UK government's Future Flight Challenge project, which is looking at all sorts of the next generation of aviation. So that's from small drones in cities up to, as you mentioned, the sort of the regional air transport routes that we've got in Scotland. And it's perfectly suited to the north of Scotland because aviation is an integral part of the way that the communities are able to survive and work in the region. You may know that some of the routes are operated on what's called a public service obligation, so they're subsidised by the government to allow the communities to have access to Central Belt and to London. And so the project aligns with both UK and the Scottish Government's ambitions to combat climate change. The Scottish Government has declared an ambition to decarbonise the Highlands and Islands as an aviation zone by 2040. So we need to look at alternatives to carbon-based aviation. So as you say, we've got Ampaire coming across from the US to do some market survey flying with their aircraft, which is an electric hybrid aircraft. Zero Avia, who are currently based in England, are coming up to do the same with their hydrogen-based aircraft. And we're also looking at autonomous aircraft to meet community needs, and that's access to healthcare and education, and for businesses to have connectivity. So we'll be talking to the health service boards in and around the Highlands and Islands to look at medical logistics and supply routes. And for example, some of the scheduled airline routes are predicated on the need to get teachers to some of the island schools. So having an on-demand, low environmental cost aviation system would benefit to everybody who lives in the community.
And I suppose that if you crack the problem here, then it's something that can be used in remote and rural communities across the world.
Well, absolutely, and the other attraction of Orkney especially, but of Scotland in general, is the access to green energy. And there's no point having green transport if you don't get the energy from a green source. But as you say, if it works in Orkney and the weather that we have, then it'll work in the Caribbean, in Polynesia, all around the world. So it is really a local solution to a global problem.
And finally, just a quick word on your own Phoenix UAV. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I understand that this is something that could actually be an alternative way of actually launching satellites and such like into space.
It's called Phoenix. It was, again, funded by the UK government through Innovate UK, a project of 4 companies, 4 government catapults and 3 universities, of which we were the lead partner. So I was the chief engineer on the aircraft, based on a principle that's been around for a long time, but it's never been realised in air before. There are underwater equivalents. These vehicles have bladders that inflate and deflate repeatedly and therefore change their buoyancy. And so they glide up and down. And it's that up and down motion that also provides the forward motion, so they don't need a separate engine. So they're very energy efficient. Unfortunately, air is almost 1,000 times less dense than water, so that displacement thing won't work. So we needed to alter the mass by compressing air inside the aircraft to make it go up and down. So we built a 10-meter wingspan prototype that flew in April in 2019 and repeatedly went forward under its own propulsion just by varying the buoyancy. So it goes up and down and forward at the same time. The rationale behind it is that there are quite a few alternative aircraft that satisfy the high altitude pseudo satellite and high altitude long endurance roles, as you mentioned, but they're quite complex. They're based on electric motors with lots of heavy batteries lots of solar cells, and the solar cells are very expensive. So by removing the need for engines to push yourself forward, you reduce the need for both batteries and engines, and the solar cells that recharge them. So we had a fraction of the amount of solar cells. And if you're looking at long endurance and high altitude, then you want something that's mechanically and electrically simple. If it's complex, there are more things to break, so you have to bring it down in case of a failure. So having a simple, low-cost, almost disposable alternative is quite attractive. So as you say, we're looking at a next generation which will get to 60,000 feet where the weather is most benign, and carry a payload of 100 kilograms for just those roles that you mentioned.
A pleasure to catch up with you as always, Andrew. Thanks very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Gary.